My family mocked my 10-year-old daughter until she cried. I cut them off forever. My sister reported me to child services for abuse. But the investigation exposed who the real monsters were, and now they all face legal consequences they'll never forget. I'm 37 years old. I work as a software engineer from home, and I basically just cut contact with my parents and my sister after they mocked my 10-year-old daughter until she cried. I know it sounds dramatic, but the truth is, it was the straw that broke the camel's back after years, literal years, of putting up with their shit. And now half the family hates me. My sister tried to take custody of Chloe away from me, and I had to deal with Child Protective Services because someone made an anonymous report saying I was an abusive father. I mean, seriously? But let me start from the beginning because this has context, a lot of context. I grew up in a family where nothing you did was ever good enough. You know? My dad, Benjamin, was always one of those arrogant types who think they know everything better than everyone. And my mom, Virginia, is more the passive-aggressive style. Like she'll say something super hurtful but with a smile and then act like you're the crazy one for getting upset. My sister Heather, who's 3 years younger than me, was always the golden child, the one who never did anything wrong. And I was the problem son, even though I literally just tried to exist without being criticized every 5 minutes. When I was like 16, I realized I was never going to earn their approval, so I stopped trying, which obviously made everything worse, because according to them, I was an ungrateful rebel. I left home at 18 for college and basically kept minimal contact for years. I met Danielle in my sophomore year. We got married when I was 25, had Chloe 2 years later, and got divorced when she was 4. It was an amicable divorce. Like we realized we were better as co-parents than as a couple, and to this day, we get along well for our daughter's sake. I have Chloe with me most of the time because Danielle travels a lot for work, but she sees her every other weekend and during vacations, and we communicate all the time about what the kid needs. She's a good mom. It's just that her career is very demanding. During the first years after the divorce, my parents were relatively absent from our lives, which honestly was a relief. I'd see them maybe at Christmas and some family birthday, kept conversations superficial, and that was it. But like 2 years ago, they started pushing more to see Chloe, saying they wanted to be part of her life, that she was their only granddaughter. Heather doesn't have kids and according to her never will. And I thought, well, maybe with their granddaughter they're different. Maybe I can give them a chance to be decent grandparents. Spoiler alert, they weren't different. The first visits were okay, I guess. They'd come to dinner every 2 or 3 months, bring gifts for Chloe. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but I started noticing little things, small comments that made me uncomfortable. Like my mom telling Chloe she should eat fewer sweets because she didn't want to get chubby, or my dad criticizing, and that I let her wear sweatpants to go to the grocery store, because, according to him, a girl should look more presentable. I'd say something each time, like, hey, that's not appropriate, but they always acted like I was exaggerating or being too sensitive. Chloe started piano lessons like 3 months ago. She specifically asked for it, saw a girl playing in a YouTube video and said, "Mom, I want to do that." She calls me Mom sometimes by mistake, which is adorable. I got a used digital piano on Facebook Marketplace for like $300. Found a great teacher who comes to the house twice a week, and Chloe was super excited. She was doing well for a beginner. I mean, obviously she sounded like a beginner because she'd literally been at it for 2 weeks, but she was happy, and that's what mattered. So, like a month ago, I invited my parents to dinner. I don't know why I did it. I guess I had this stupid idea that we could have a normal relationship, and Chloe was excited to show them what she'd learned on piano. Dinner was tense from the start. My dad made like 5 comments about how I was cooking the meat. He made baked chicken. Nothing complicated. My mom mentioned 3 times that the house was messy. There were literally 2 plates in the sink. But I took a deep breath and let it all pass because I didn't want to ruin the evening. After dinner, Chloe was so excited she was practically dragging my parents to the piano. She'd been practicing this super simple piece, like absolute beginner level, something from a children's method book. She sat on the bench, all serious and focused, and started to play. Obviously it wasn't perfect. She missed some notes. The rhythm was a bit uneven, but you can see the effort she puts in. How she bites her lip when she's concentrating. And to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world because it was my baby learning something new. She finished the piece, turned toward us with this huge smile, and I was about to applaud when my dad literally started laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle, it was a loud guffaw, and my mom followed with this ha 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 laugh so fake and condescending. My dad said something like, "Well, I guess not everyone can be Mozart," and my mom added, "Sweetie, maybe piano isn't your thing. Have you considered something simpler?" I froze for a second because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Chloe's smile disappeared immediately. She got down from the bench and ran to her room, and I heard the door slam. I looked at my parents, and my dad was still smiling like, "I don't understand what the problem is," and something in me just exploded. I told them to get out of my house. Now. And my dad started with his typical, "Don't be so sensitive. We were just joking, routine." And I literally yelled, "Get out of my house. I'm not playing. Leave now." My mom tried the act of, "But we just want what's best for her. We didn't want her to get false hopes about having talent." And I told them the kid is 10 years old and has been playing piano for 2 weeks. What the hell did they expect? A Carnegie Hall performance? My dad went into authoritarian mode, that tone he uses when he wants to intimidate people, and told me not to dare speak to my mother like that I was being a ridiculous, overprotective father. I grabbed my keys, opened the door, and told them if they didn't leave in the next 30 seconds, I was going to call the police. They finally left, with my dad muttering something about how I was a disaster of a father, and my mom doing her victim face. You know, the "I can't believe my son treats me like this" one. I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment because I was shaking with rage, and then went to Chloe's room. She was lying on her bed, crying into her pillow, and when she saw me come in, she said, "Dad, I play really bad, right? That's why they laughed." My heart broke. I literally felt like someone had kicked me in the chest. I sat on her bed and told her no. That she played beautifully for someone who was just learning. That the grandparents were wrong and that I was super proud of her. I explained that sometimes adults say hurtful things because they themselves have problems, not because the other person did anything wrong. She asked if she was going to see them again, and I told her not for a while, that they needed to learn to be kinder. She fell asleep like an hour later, and I stayed awake all night, thinking about all the times my parents had made me feel exactly like that when I was a kid. The next day, I sent my parents a text. It basically said that what they did was completely unacceptable, that they hurt my daughter, and that they weren't going to have contact with her until they could apologize sincerely and show that they respected my boundaries as a father. My dad responded something like, "You're being dramatic as always," and my mom sent a long paragraph about how they were just trying to prepare her for the real world where not everyone is. "I'm going to tell you you're special." I blocked them both after that. I thought that would be the end. But oh no, it was just beginning. Like 2 days later, I get a call from my sister, Heather. We hadn't talked in months because she's basically a clone of my parents, all arrogant and critical, but apparently they ran to tell her their version of the story. She immediately started with the, "How dare you cut contact with our parents" routine, that they were devastated, that I'd always been a terrible son. I told her she had no idea what really happened, and she said our parents told her everything, that I'd gone crazy because they made an innocent comment about Chloe's piano. I explained exactly what they said and how they laughed at a 10-year-old girl, and she said something like, "Well, maybe she needed to hear an honest opinion. Not everyone is good at everything, and it's better she learned that now." I literally said, "What the hell is wrong with you? She's 10 years old. She's learning something new. And instead of supporting her, you destroy her." Heather started yelling that I'd always been too soft with Chloe, that I was raising her to be weak and unable to handle criticism. I told her to go fuck herself and hung up. But Heather didn't stop there. Apparently, she decided to contact Danielle, my ex, and basically tried to convince her that I was raising Chloe wrong, that I was being overprotective, and that maybe we should consider changing the custody arrangement. Danielle, bless her heart, called me immediately to tell me and to say she was completely on my side, that what my parents did was horrible, and that Heather was crazy if she thought she was going to support her campaign. I thanked her, and she told me if I needed anything, a written testimony or whatever, that I could count on her. The next few days were a constant bombardment. I started getting messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, people who didn't even talk to me regularly, all basically saying the same thing, that I was a terrible son, that I was being dramatic, that my parents only wanted what was best for Chloe. Obviously, my parents and Heather had been doing their victim tour with the whole extended family, telling their version where they were, the innocent grandparents being cruelly separated from their granddaughter by their crazy son. I blocked them all, like, every one of them. I didn't have time or energy to deal with that toxicity. Then my mom sent an email, because I'd blocked her number but not her email yet. It was this long, manipulative email about how they'd been reflecting. Spoiler, they hadn't reflected, and that they realized maybe they'd been a bit harsh. But that they really thought they needed to be more involved in raising Chloe, because clearly I didn't know what I was doing as a single father. She said something about how it was obvious Chloe needed a strong mother figure in her life. Completely ignoring that Danielle exists, and that they could provide that stability. I didn't respond to the email. I just archived it because something told me I might need it later as evidence of their craziness. And I was right, because things kept escalating in ways I never imagined. Like a week after all this, I'm working from home. Chloe's at school, and I hear someone ring the doorbell. I go to the door and it's my dad, just standing there with that face he makes when he thinks he's about to win an argument. I tell him through the closed door to leave, that he's not welcome here, and he starts saying we need to talk like adults, that this is ridiculous. I tell him there's nothing to talk about, that he hurt my daughter and he's not going to have access to her or me until he can acknowledge what he did wrong. He starts raising his voice, saying I'm his son and I owe him respect, that I can't keep him away from his granddaughter, all that typical shit. I tell him if he doesn't leave, I'm going to call the police. And he laughs like you. Wouldn't dare. I take out my phone and start dialing, and he finally leaves, but not without first yelling that I was going to regret this, that I was going to see what happens when you cut off your family. That threat made me nervous. I'm not going to lie. My dad has always been the type who needs to be in control, and the fact that I was cutting him off completely was probably driving him crazy. I installed a doorbell camera, like those Ring ones, just to have it recorded if he showed up again. I told Danielle everything, and she agreed it was better to be prepared. That people like my parents sometimes escalate things in unpredictable ways. And I was right to be worried, because like 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, someone else rings my doorbell. Chloe was already home. We were doing homework together at the kitchen table. And when I opened the door, there's a lady with a clipboard identifying herself as a CPS worker, Child Protective Services. My stomach literally dropped to the floor. She tells me they received an anonymous report alleging that I was emotionally abusing my daughter, denying her access to her extended family, and raising her in an unstable environment. I let her in because what else was I going to do? And she was super professional, but also obviously there to investigate whether I was an abusive father. She started asking me questions about my relationship with Chloe, about her mom, about why I'd cut contact with my parents. I told her the whole story, from the piano incident to my dad's threats, and she took notes without showing much emotion. Then she asked to speak with Chloe alone, and I had to stay in the kitchen while they talked in the living room. And I literally felt like I was going to have a panic attack. Like half an hour later, the worker came out with Chloe and told me she needed to see Chloe's room, the kitchen, basically take a tour of the house. I showed everything. Chloe's room was clean and full of her stuff. The kitchen had food, the house was safe, everything was fine. She asked me more questions about Chloe's school, her doctor, her daily routine. I took out my phone and showed her my mom's email, my sister's texts, everything I'd saved. I showed her messages between Danielle and me coordinating everything about Chloe, proof that we had healthy co-parenting. Finally, after like 2 hours, she told me she was going to write her report, but that based on what she saw and heard, there didn't seem to be any basis for the allegations. She talked to Chloe, who said she was happy, that I was a good dad, that she liked our life together. The house was clean, there was food, Chloe was well cared for, and there were obviously no signs of abuse. She told me she was probably going to close the case after verifying some things with Chloe's school and her pediatrician, but not to worry. She left, and I literally sat on the floor and cried. That night, after putting Chloe to bed, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. One specializing in family law. I told him the whole situation, and he basically told me I needed to document absolutely everything, that this type of behavior from my family could escalate, and that it would be a good idea to consider a restraining order against at least my sister because she'd clearly been the one who made the CPS report. He also recommended sending a cease and desist letter to my parents, basically a legal document telling them not to contact me anymore or face consequences. The lawyer prepared the documents, like $500 for the consultation and the letters, but it was worth every penny. We sent the letter to my parents certified, where it basically said that all unsolicited contact from them would be considered harassment and that any attempt to contact Chloe without my permission would result in legal action. For Heather, we started the process for a temporary restraining order, citing the false CPS report, her attempts to interfere with my custody, and the pattern of harassment. CPS closed the case officially, like a week later. The worker called me to tell me she'd spoken with Chloe's school, where they told her she's a happy, well-adjusted kid with no signs of problems. With her pediatrician, who confirmed I always bring Chloe to her appointments and that she's healthy. And with Danielle, who gave strong testimony about what I'm like as a father. The case was closed as unfounded, which gave me huge relief, but also made me feel a rage I can't even describe. Someone from my own family had tried to use the child protection system as a weapon against me. That was like 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything from my parents since the lawyer's letter, probably because they got scared when they realized I was serious. The restraining order against Heather was temporarily approved, and there's a hearing in a month to make it permanent, where I'm basically going to present all the evidence of her harassment. My whole extended family still isn't talking to me, which is honestly more of a relief than a loss, because if they're going to believe my parents' version without even asking me what happened, then I don't need them in my life. Danielle has been incredible through all this. She's completely supported me, explained to Chloe in age-appropriate terms why she's not seeing her grandparents, and basically become my #1 ally in this whole mess. She told me something last week that stuck with me. She said her own parents are toxic too, and that sometimes the healthiest decision you can make as a parent is to protect your kids from the people who hurt you, even if those people are family. Chloe is fine, or at least as fine as she can be. She's still playing piano. Actually, she's practicing for a small recital. Her teacher is organizing for all her students next month. I asked her if she wanted us to invite anyone specific, and she said, just me and her mom. And that seemed perfect to me. She asked me a few days ago if the grandparents were ever coming back, and I told her the truth, that I don't know. That maybe someday if they learn to be kinder, but that for now the two of us are fine alone. She thought for a moment and then said, "That's okay, Dad. I'm happy here with you anyway," and went back to her homework like nothing. The truth is, I don't know if I did everything right. Part of me wonders if I should have tried one more conversation before cutting them off completely, if maybe I should have given them another chance after the incident. But then I remember Chloe's face when they laughed at her. I remember all the times they made me feel like that when I was a kid, and I realize I'm breaking a cycle. My parents never protected me from their own toxicity, but I can protect Chloe from them. Sometimes I feel guilty about depriving her of her grandparents, but then I think she's not losing much. She's losing people who would make her feel bad about herself, who would criticize everything she does, who would try to mold her to be what they want, instead of letting her be who she is. And that's not a loss, that's protection. I know a lot of people won't understand it. They'll think I'm being dramatic or that I'm being cruel to my parents in their old age. But I don't care what they think. My only priority is Chloe, that she grows up knowing she's loved unconditionally, that she can try new things without fear of being ridiculed, that she has a dad who's going to defend her even when that means going against the whole family. If that makes me the terrible son, the overprotective father, the one who ruined the family relationships, then I guess that's what I am. And I'm completely at peace with that.